online series. We hope you've been enjoying the series so far. And I'd like to welcome today James Trewby from the Columban missionaries, who is the Justice and Peace education worker. So the Columbans are best known for their commitment to justice and peace and interreligious dialogue. James works and supports with young people and educators and encourages and highlighting the importance of faith in action. So welcome, James, to our series. Yeah, welcome.
Thank you. I'm super nervous, but I'm here.
Don't worry about it. It'll be fine. So first of all, could you tell us sort of a little bit about yourself, if people don't know, and kind of how you got to where you are right now?
Wow. Okay, hello, I'm James. I am suddenly 40 years old, which was a surprise to everyone, including me. I live in Birmingham. I'm married with 2 small children, and I have the best job in the world. I am the Columban's Justice and Peace education worker, which is just the dream job. And it was a job that I was lucky enough to be able to help make up. And I love it. I think I'm fortunate to be paid to do what I think I ought to be doing, what I'm called to do. Yeah, and what's the expression like when you've never done a day of work in your life, when you're doing what
you love your job so much you've never felt like you've been working. Like that.
It definitely feels like that. My journey. So I was, like most people, I started as a baby. And then I got through school and I was educated by the Salesians. So the Salesians of Don Bosco have been absolutely crucial in my formation. They're a religious order committed to the young and the poor. And that's been huge. And I'm actually a thing called a Salesian cooperator, which means I've committed to try and live out some of those Salesian ideals. So they educated me. And then I started getting involved with volunteer stuff at your sort of age at school. Like a summer camp in Newcastle with the Salesian Sisters, with their organisation VDES, which is brilliant. Go and join VDES, everybody. I went to the Philippines at that age, and that really blew my mind. I went out to stay with a family, and it was wonderful. And it really kind of helped me fall in love with different cultures and understanding like simplicity a bit more, and it just changed me. It was wonderful. I went to university, did a maths degree. Everyone loves maths. Yeah. Why do you need a mathematician at a party? Because they integrate well.
Oh.
Yeah. And then I trained as a primary school teacher. So the logic was I was going to be a teacher, and I was going to go and work somewhere around the world. And my dream was to work with street children. And I was kind of all fired up. Looking back, there was a lot of the kind of great white messiah about me. Like I'd bought into some of this rubbish about kind of the little white boy coming around the world and saving the world. And hopefully as we go through this interview, I'll tell you a bit about how that changed. Yeah, so I was trained as a teacher. Then I taught primary. Then I joined the Salesians. So I was on my way to being a Salesian brother. Did that for a bit. And discerned my future. Discern, I think it's a really important word. It was a really useful time to kind of work out what it was that I was called to be, what made me happy, what challenged me, stuff like that. They put me teaching in a secondary school in Bolton, which I loved. And then they sent me down to the novitiate, which I found more challenging. That's a year of prayer and reflection. And I wasn't very good at sitting down and praying and reflecting. I've learned about myself, I'm quite active. So during that year, I remember kind of going for runs with a rubbish bag to pick up the rubbish, just so that I could feel like I'd contributed something that day. And eventually I left there, and then I went with the Salesians as a volunteer to the Philippines for a year, and lived in a slum community and taught maths and played basketball and music, and wonderful. That was a life-changing moment, and I'll come back to that. Then Salesian sponsored me to do a master's education and training for development. And that was when I was really thinking about kind of gap years. So I wrote about the pedagogy of the gap year. and it was thinking about how this whole thing about people from here going over to poor countries can be really exploitative and dodgy and not anywhere near as useful as it could be. So I was trying to say, right, if we're going to do it, how do we do it right? How do we make sure it leads us to ongoing commitment to faith in action, to campaigning, to anti-poverty stuff, to community? How do we grow as humans through that experience? So working with Martin Poulsen and others, we developed that, and for 6 years I worked for the Salesians, running a wonderful organisation called Bosco Volunteer Action. There's another link you can add. Yeah, still going. You want to volunteer overseas? Go and look at them. And then I did a PhD, which was looking at life stories of activist educators. So I was taking people who were like hardcore activists and also multipliers. So they brought other people into social justice stuff. And I looked at their life stories. So I did life story interviews, massive long interviews, looking at them. And then I analysed it and turned it into a PhD. Since then, I've had children, so I've forgotten almost all of it. But yeah, lots of the ideas that are kind of woven through my work now came from that. Yeah, and then at the end of that, I started dreaming, and what should I do next? Or near the end of that, and kind of worked out what I thought God wanted me to do and what would make me happy and how I could make a good influence on the world. So I started walking around with this job description, trying to convince people to employ me to do that. And working with the Salesians and then the Columbans, I came in with these ideas and they had these ideas, and we wrote something collaborative, and this beautiful job that I do now. There you go. Was that?
Oh, perfect.
Your journey and how you got. Right. Well, that was fun, Tom. Thanks very much.
There we go. I've got a few more questions before we go, so get those out of the way. I'm sorry. So across that journey, obviously, came across lots of different people, came across lots of different places. What kept you going? Because as a young person, and I'm sure other young people can attest to this, like one of the hardest things is motivating us to keep going and sort of realizing that actually what we are doing is making a difference. So what, like, if you had to, maybe not like a single person, but like what things kept you going? What things motivated you while you were doing all of that?
When I was young, or
yeah, young and now.
Yeah, because I'm not young now. Let's just make that very clear. I mean, obviously you're an inspiration, Tom. I better put that out there first. When I was young, that's the thing. All right, so I remember a particular Salesian sister, and we were in Newcastle, and we were doing this summer camp, and there were some kids that were they brought like flick knives or something into the youth club, and they were stabbing the doors of the toilets, and I remember her kicking them out and saying, you know, these they can't stay. But what she didn't say, we're kicking them out the whole project. She said, we'll kick them out tonight. And I remember her standing at the door and waving at them and saying, you know, I'll see you tomorrow. And they were angry and upset, and they were throwing stones in her direction. And she was still standing there waving, saying, I'll see you tomorrow. So there was something about vocation there. There was something like her commitment. It wasn't just a superficial, like, I'm paid to work with kids. It was, I love kids and I find God in kids, and I'm gonna work with them, and if they're challenging, I'm gonna love them anyway, and it's gonna be all right. And I remember being inspired by that. There was a teacher at school who ran a sleep out for Crisis at Christmas. So Crisis is a big homeless project in London, and he would get sixth formers sleeping outside, sponsored, to raise money. Like, and the amount of paperwork that takes, like, that's not an easy thing to do. So the commitment was great, but he let me take some leadership in it. And a bit like you now, like trying on those leadership roles, letting me kind of organize stuff, it really, like, it empowered me, but it also gave me some tools, you know, like it prepared me for stuff I was going to do in the future. There's been various saints and blesseds and holy people that have been inspirational. to name check a few, Don Bosco, and his work with the young and the poor, Oscar Romero, and particularly the way that he kind of moved from kind of faith to justice, and then Dorothy Day, who kind of had the justice stuff and then moved towards the faith, and both of those two have been really important pillars in my life. And the balance between charity and justice, so that it's not just been, you're never just campaigning, you're also getting your hands dirty and meeting people and having a relationship and knowing, you know, like, so it's a bit of cold face stuff and it's a bit of lobbying advocacy. Yeah. And then, like, the proper answer is probably my parents, Jesus, and my wife. So, you know, they're part of it too, you know, like Jesus, this radical. I was on a call with a Columban missionary last night, and he said the worst thing that's ever happened to the church is the domestication of Jesus. The way that, you know, this kind of white Jesus standing there, kind of like, it wasn't like that. It was he was a radical man. He was living counterculturally. He was challenging the norms of his time. He was reaching out to the poor and to the oppressed and to the, you know, because remember, it's a military occupation. So he was there in a military occupation, gently challenging things, non-violently challenging things. So that yeah, Jesus, but kind of Jesus the activist, Jesus the radical, Jesus the person who reaches out. Yeah. This is, you said it was only going to be half an hour. I keep ranting.
Don't worry about it, Joe. Don't worry.
Okay.
All good stuff. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
I better say there's loads of Columbans as well. Like, so now, like, I'm paid. I have a job, and I live in my lovely little house, and I'm married and I have the children, and, you know, like, in some ways I've got that kind of comfortable little bubble. But because just down the road from me are lay missionaries from the Philippines and from Chile, and now one just arrived from Korea, that are doing radical work with asylum seekers in Birmingham. They live simply, they live in voluntary poverty, and because I'm in contact with Columbans around the world that are doing all sorts of incredible things, like, it forces me, encourages me, challenges me to stop. You know, I can't just become words. I've got to try and make sure that I keep walking the talk.
Yeah, it's making the things that you're trying to put into words also put into action.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
And not become a hypocrite. Like, it'd be so easy in my job to become a hypocrite. It'd be so easy to just talk about justice and not be actually doing anything myself.
Yeah.
So there's having people around me like that. And I'd say, if as a young person, like, to me, the best way for you to make sure that you kind of find your way in this is to surround yourself with people like that. Like, to have a community around you, to have friends, to have people to look up to have, to be part of groups. Like, I saw that you've got Tom from Citizens doing a thing on starting groups. Like, groups is crucial. If you're doing this on your own, you get knackered, you burn out. If you can surround yourself and, like, have friends, like, so many of my friends are involved in different justicey stuff. It kind of encourages me, challenges me, keeps me going.
Yeah. I think that's what's been really useful about our Million Minutes conversations, but I just actually mentioned what that is. Every week for the last, I think, 12 weeks, I think it's something like that. Me and James have been involved with some conversations with young adults who have received a Million Minutes award. So Anna, who we had on a few weeks ago, was a part of that. Layla came on as a guest for one of those as well, who we've also had on. And that's been really great because it's not only inspired me to kind of think of new ideas, but it's also kind of kept me going and kind of given me a kind of support network to kind of bounce ideas off and talk to people about things and kind of have people who have common interests, because I don't think I've got many friends with that common interest right now. And it's kind of like finding people that you can relate to, I guess, is the important thing. And that can be quite difficult, but once you have it, it really helps. Yeah.
And you've got to consciously build it. It won't just happen.
Yeah, you've got to really work for it.
Once you get to university, like, at university, you have to make some choices. And like, it's about where you put your time. And if you put your time into the people that are doing that sort of stuff, then that will support you in doing it. The other thing is, I'd say, don't let it be a clique. Like, what you don't want is a group of people that can entirely agree with you or that are entirely like you. So you want, like, for me, it's making sure that I've got some justice friends who are not Catholic.
Yeah.
That's really useful because they help me. What's the bit in scripture about the don't point at the stick in someone else's eye when you've got a log in your own? You know, like there's something about they will help me see within the church what I need to be looking at or what I need to be challenging or celebrating as well, you know, because they look at Laudato Si and go, wow, Catholic Church doing great things. Yeah. Or they look at the role of women and they say, oh no, the Catholic Church has a little bit of a journey to go there, doesn't it? Mm. Here we are, two white boys talking to each other, you know, like there's so having friends that challenge, not all the same, but having, Yeah,
and I think that quite nicely brings on to the next question. So, like, what throughout your journey, what have been some like challenges that you've sort of had to overcome, or even trying to overcome now? Like, what have been sort of the main barriers for you to get from where you were to where you are now, into like from kind of before, like working in schools, not working in school, being in school, to now having this job that's, you know, so cool?
Challenges. All right, one really early and useful challenge, I think, was when I was about 17, I was diagnosed with a heart condition. And I have a pacemaker, or I had a pacemaker up until 2 months ago. They've just taken it out. That's another story. But so having a pacemaker and kind of being like that was a big mortality thing, because I was like 17 and I thought I could do anything. And then I needed this. And if I hadn't lived in a rich country, I wouldn't have had that. So that was a moment that really encouraged me to recognize my own privilege. And it spurred me on, you know, like it made me realize how lucky I was. And I always end up quoting Spider-Man or Uncle Ben, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. That it's having that opportunity, having that, like most of the world, they wouldn't be able to afford that. It wouldn't have been an option, but here, thanks God for the NHS. What other challenges? I think the discernment and working out what it is that you're called to be is an ongoing challenge for everyone, and it's never a finished process. Like that's a thing. Like even now, it's working out, you know, is this still the right place for me? Am I doing this the right way? What do I need to change? How do I need to be? What do I need to keep learning? Like all this Black Lives Matter stuff has been really useful. There's a kind of, hey James, you're not a finished process. Keep learning, keep thinking. So that discernment process through the solution, some of that wasn't easy, but it was really good for me. The thing about, like, I suppose from when I was about 15, 16, I was always desperate to go and be overseas, and particularly after the Philippines, I loved it. And I definitely, like, this is ego, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I kind of imagined the James Trewby Home for Street Children that was basically basketball, eating mangoes and playing saxophone. And it took me a while to kind of let go of that dream and realize, actually, for me, the call was to come back here and look at justice issues that are affecting there. Like, I didn't want that. Like, when you wake up on a rainy day in Birmingham, you're thinking, oh my God, I wish I was in Kenya. But actually, I think this is where I'm supposed to be and the kind of thing I'm supposed to be doing.
So across your journey, like, which places are the most memorable? You've mentioned the Philippines, and which ones have like the most profound impact on you? Which ones have, like, when you've gone, have obviously you've come back and then been really inspired to like work to kind of help them, I guess, or work to kind of, because I think for me, like when I went to South Africa and I came back, like I saw it as sort of, I want to work because I know that they're in a position where they're potentially unable to yet, you know, have the experience and have the opportunity that I have. So what places have you been that have like had that impact, I guess, is my question.
I'm really encouraged to hear that South African experience is something that's kind of formed you and encouraged you, like, and challenged.
Encouraged me to work harder, definitely, because I don't think I was working hard enough before, and now I'm pushing myself in every way.
Because I think the thing that struck me about gap years and all that stage when I was doing the Bosco Volunteer Action stuff, there are so many organisations that are just exploiting young people's altruism. Like, you want to help, and off you go and you help, and then you come back and that's it, you've done your bit. Whereas I think really what goes on there is a privileged encounter. It's an opportunity to see and understand and meet, and it's not what you do there, it's about how that changes you and what you do in response to it, I think, a lot of the time. I'm sure there are other examples, but yeah, so I love the way you frame the question. So I would encourage people, if they are thinking of going overseas, like, do it. I want you to see the world, and it will challenge you, but make sure you make it properly educative, formative. Yeah. There's loads of examples I could give you, and I'm ashamed to say how much I've flown. Like, I think my children will watch this video in like 20 years' time, and they'll be like, "Dad, you caused climate change single-handedly, you idiot." But yeah, at that time, that was kind of what we did, and now I try not to. But yeah, so Philippines, living in that slum community, it changed everything, really. A particular thing, I suppose. Well, there was loving life there, the relationship and the community, and like, no one was homeless within the slum community, and the friendships I made there, and you know, it changed my view of poverty, which was really important, and stopped it being this kind of handout mentality, and instead saying, well, these people are working hard, they have skills, they have the capacity, like it, and changed it to a more justice-based thing about, well, what's happening to these people, about debt and trade rules and climate change and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, people that are watching this are unaware of what the Columbans do and unaware of who they are. Like, could you tell us sort of a bit more about them and how you work to support people in your role? I think, yeah.
Okay, so the Columbans were originally a society of priests set up for the conversion of China. Right, that was the big plan, and it was a bunch of priests going out there and then fundraising to support that. But then they got kicked out of China and they went to many other places. And in particular, they went to places where there was poverty and where there was oppression. So in the Philippines, for example, under a dictator, Marcos, Chile under Pinochet, lots of places where they were forced to kind of think about the plight of the poor and what gospel meant in that light, and therefore liberation theology, and what it means for Jesus to bring life to the full. So they got very involved in justice and peace issues. And then the other thing that happened is they ended up in countries where there was another dominant religion. So, for example, Pakistan, an Islamic country. So they were forced to think about, what does it mean to work together with people of other faiths for the common good. So, for example, in Pakistan at the moment, they're involved in climate change and cutting back on plastic stuff and water, sanitation, working with other people of goodwill. So working with Muslims together to make change for the good of everybody. Yeah, and they're an inspirational bunch. Very early on, they started having lay missionaries as well. So as well as priests, there are people like you and I that for a minimum of 3 years go somewhere as missionaries. So they're not priests, they're not nuns, they're lay people, and they do a serious formation and training, and then they go somewhere for 3 years at least. And many of them go for 3, 6, 9, you know, into the future. And that was incredibly forward thinking of the Columbians, like properly radical, to say, do you know what, lay people can do this too, and they're important, they're part of God's mission. yeah, and then we've got some lay missionaries here from other places, and to see their commitment, oh, it's inspirational. It's fantastic. So I've been lucky enough to kind of go to some Columban projects around the world and take groups for learning experiences. So I went to the border between the States and Mexico, and to see what the Columbans are doing there in terms of kind of hands-on humanitarian, helping people who are needing help, but at the same time advocacy, challenging the kind of wall building and the nastiness to the stranger, which is completely anti-gospel. So they're doing that there. I've seen in Korea them blockading a military base, US military base on the island of Jeju. And they're priests and nuns lifting up their chairs and saying mass in the middle of the road, blocking all these military police. Like the courage. And in the Philippines, for example, there's an ecology project where they're kind of teaching people organic farming, and at the same time they're involved in advocacy and the global Catholic climate movement. So there's always justice and charity and radical and living with the poor, and yeah, the Columbans are incredible. What I do for them is I'm their justice and peace education worker, which involves all sorts of stuff. So some highlights of the last year, we're running retreat days at climate strikes. So I managed to convince a couple of secondary schools to give me groups of kids, and we would gather at the cathedral, we would pray, we would interview a missionary in Pakistan and hear about climate change on the ground. He'd give us a blessing in Urdu, and we'd charge out and join the strike. And we'd be marching along with our banners, kind of proclaiming that we should care for creation, and telling people that we were Catholics at this thing, and that this is part of our faith. And I remember whispering in some kid's ear, this is prayer. You on this march, you working for justice for people in Pakistan, this is prayer. I've been doing lots more inset recently, which I really enjoy. So if you can get to the teachers, I went into a school in Lancaster, and a kid said to me, "I remember you from last year," and I was thinking, oh great, you were inspired, and he said, "Jokes." I was like, "Can you remember anything else?" And he said, "Nope." And I was like, "Oh, I better start trying to work with the teachers." So we've done things recently, like had all the staff of a primary school had cooking lessons from asylum seekers as part of an inset day. So it completely inverts the relationship.
Yeah.
Like the teacher is the learner. They were encountering these people who are often looked down on, are suddenly the one looked up to, and they started chatting, and those teachers will then be able to go into school and say, "Oh, I've had this experience, I've met this person, I have this deeper understanding." We did an inset on homelessness where we walked through the city centre listening to podcasts of people who've been homeless in that city. Wow. And we sat and we prayed a Thomas Merton prayer in a city centre, like in the shopping centre, just quietly, like we didn't do it publicly, but like the teachers sat and read this reflection and thought about what it means, looking at all these people moving around and thinking that God is here. So that's some of the kind of things we do. We do a media competition, which will be launched September, I think. October, September. Can't remember, but we're nearly there. We're kind of planning it, and the theme we're looking at this year is racism, following all the Black Lives Matter stuff. So that'll be, I think it's 15 to 18-year-olds, and it will be a written piece or a image, and it will be on the theme of let's create a world without racism. And I saw you had one of our previous winners being interviewed a little time back. Anna Marshall was a winner 2 years ago. So we've done, I think last year was climate change, year before was migration. I think that's right, something like that. We normally have kind of gap year program ourselves. We call it the Faith in Action Volunteer Year. And young adults get to spend some time working with asylum seekers, with the lay missionaries, and with Mauricio, our interreligious dialogue coordinator. And and then sometime working with me doing justice and peace education stuff. It's a great year of growth and formation and whatever, but with COVID, we've decided not to advertise for September. We're hoping that we can advertise for January, but who knows?
Yeah. That actually takes me quite nicely onto the question that I was going to ask next, which was obviously as more and more young people, especially throughout lockdown, have started to discover kind of their voice and their, like, you know, choosing what they believe and kind of voicing that opinion, especially, you know, we've mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you have any particular opportunities that young people could get involved in, and do you have any advice for young people trying to find their voice? Would be, yeah.
Okay, so I should have mentioned the competition and the volunteering now.
In this bit, but it's fine. I thought I'd just ask it now. But
yeah. In terms of advice, I think the key thing. Oh, there's loads of key things. Let me just rant about that for a minute. So, Catholic schools are brilliant, and any Catholic teachers, chaplains, or whatever who watch this, like, you're fantastic. Thank you for all you do, and book me. But also, I think there's a risk that Catholic education teaches charity and stops there. I don't know if that's true of your education, but like, if I think of many schools I go into, like, the risk is that what you get is, oh no, something terrible has happened in the world, do a cake sale. And it kind of stops there. Like, you know, or it's wear your own clothes and raise some money.
Yeah.
Or bring in a donation. And charity is part of what we are called to. It's crucial, and it can't be forgotten. We've got to be collecting money for CAFOD, for the Columbans, for loads of others. Like, collecting money is crucial, but it's not the extent of the baptismal call. Like, we've got a lot more that we need to be getting on with. And I think the bit that is often forgotten is the justice stuff. It's kind of seen as a thing for the hippies. Like, it's in parishes or in schools, like, there might be a couple of radicals that are getting on with it, but actually it's core to what it is to be Christian. So the way I like to think of it is what I call the repertoire of action. So it's like a toolkit. It's a toolkit of stuff that you can draw upon when there is injustice. So, for example, charity is in there, fundraising is in there. My knees are a little bit shocked because I used to do marathons raising money, and that was a big way I used to raise money for stuff. But at the same time, you've got to get used to contacting your MP, going on protests, praying about stuff. I think there is definitely a place for non-violent direct action. Like, I would encourage young people to get involved with the climate strikes, and I'd encourage schools to find ways to help the young people do that in a way that could be mutually beneficial for your school as well, because I think that's absolutely possible. I'd say, advice-wise, is one of the exercises I sometimes do in school is I have all these juggling balls, and on them I've written social justice issues. So there's a racism one, or a prejudice, or homelessness, or whatever. And I get the kids stand in a circle and juggle the ball, and eventually they fall. And the point I want to make to them is work out what you're called to and concentrate on that. You can't do everything. Pick a couple of issues that you've got time and energy and that the Spirit is moving on, and focus on them. Like, it's not that the other stuff isn't important, it's that you've got a lot going on in your life, especially as a young person. Like, the pressure on young people is petrifying. So do what you can and don't burn yourself out, but do something. So work out what it is, which is the juggling ball that you want to keep in the air, what's the issue that burns for you that God's calling you to do something about, and then do something about it. Don't overthink it. Find something to do, get started, find others, build community, and that'll change, and that's part of the discernment. Like, maybe that's your issue at the moment, and then you'll call over here, and that's all right, because all of it is building up this toolkit. Balance between charity and justice, developing a toolkit, and working out which ones you're called to and taking some little steps. Those would be the key. Oh, and prayer. I think the relationship between prayer and action is interesting. Like, how prayer might lead you to action, or how action might bring you back to prayer.
Yeah.
And kind of let that be a complex mess. That's what I found for me. Like, it's a real messy relationship. but actually that seems to work for me, so might work for others.
There we go. So James, I have one final thing to ask for this interview. Do you have any helpful links or websites or anything that young people could use right now or help right now to kind of either further read upon some of the stuff that we've mentioned today, or I guess you'd like to share that would just be useful resources for people? And you can obviously, if you want to share your screen, we can do that now as well.
Yeah, I've missed that bit really. I'll do some of that. Just let me be a good Columban employee. Right, there's my screen. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it now.
And how do I move this thing? Yeah. There we go. Right. So this is the Columban website, and you'll find lots of stuff on here. There's loads of kind of articles and whatever about interreligious dialogue and justice and peace issues and mission and faith and stuff like that. Anti-plastic stuff. That's about Sophie's Skull. You'll find Dorothy Day. Yeah, you'll find loads of stuff on there. And in particular, I would encourage you to look at the Columban magazine Vocation for Justice, which you can get online. So here is a recent issue. So this one was focused on Laudato Si and climate change and things like that. But there's all sorts in here, and every time there's at least one page which is young people in education, which is what I do. So there's some stuff on Laudato Si. Yeah, and here's my page this time. So this was about climate strikes and protests and things like that. And we've got the winner of one of the winners of a previous essay competition in there. So go and have a look at that. That's good stuff. I'm trying to work out how to work well with families. If anyone wants to be in touch about working with families, I have this website I've been working on with activities, themes around justice and peace and solidarity and prayer and things. So like taking your children on their first march, stuff like that. And what to do if you see someone homeless, like ideas about how you might, as a family, respond to that. I need to stop sharing the screen. I'd recommend people look at the life of Dorothy Day. I think that would be a challenging and encouraging thing for people. The Letter to a Young Activist from Thomas Merton says some of the things that I've said much better and much more eloquently, and it's well worth a look. Find your local climate strike, get involved. They're doing stuff online now. Just because COVID doesn't mean there's no climate strikes. Get online and have a look. Please enter our media competition when we get around to putting that out, and will Spark promote that for us when we're ready? Absolutely. I can't let you win now. It'll look too.
It'll look too suspicious. No, maybe next year.
Yeah, that's. Oh, Million Minutes. I've done some great stuff during this time, and in particular, I'd look at the Prepare the Future stuff. I know you had Anna on mentioning that. So I've been part of the team editing it. Some really good stuff there to help young people process what have they learned during this time, what's been challenging, what do they want to get back to, what do they want to leave. Like, it's well worth a look. Is that enough?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, James, for joining us this week. I am so happy that we've done this because it's perfect. Thank you. And I'm sure people who are watching this and or listening to this are as inspired as I am now, because I think, we've been on things before, and I like some of this is, I've heard bits and pieces of this, but now I've got the whole picture. So I think this is not only great for me, but for people watching as well. And of course, I've got to do the usual YouTube stuff. So please don't forget to like and comment in the on the video, and remember to go and look at our Twitter and Facebook pages as we promote lots of different things that are going on within our diocese, but also with CAFOD, the Columbans, Million Minutes, etc. So it's a great place to look for that. We post videos I think once a week at the moment, and whenever we can get them out, we put them out. And if you press, I believe, the bell icon when you subscribe, you get notified when those videos get released. But you also get notified when you are on our Twitter and Facebook as well. So yeah, there we go. Unfortunately, that's the end. But thank you again, James, for joining us. It's been a real pleasure, and I hope people have enjoyed this as much as I've enjoyed it. So yeah, thank you very much.